It began on a rainy morning in a quiet parking lot. A black veteran stopped to buy a birthday gift for his niece. 10 minutes later, he lay bleeding while someone shouted he reached for a gun. But what they didn't know was this. When his heart stopped, a forgotten signal came alive. It woke 5 men who once swore an oath. No one gets left behind. And this time, they weren't bringing guns. They were bringing justice. Rain hung over Atlanta like a gray curtain that morning, soft enough to smear reflections across the supermarket parking lot. The neon, open 24 hours sign flickered in the puddles near the entrance, pulsing red and white against the wet asphalt. Marcus Hale parked his old silver SUV 2 rows away from the door. He sat there for a moment, listening to the wipers drag across the glass, and took a slow breath. His right leg, the one that wasn't real, ached in the cold. He rubbed it, the habit of a man who never fully forgot the desert heat where he'd lost it. He was only here for a few groceries and a stuffed unicorn for his niece's birthday, a 10-minute stop before heading home. He adjusted his army baseball cap, grabbed his cane, and stepped out of the car. The metallic click of the prosthetic echoed beneath the steady drizzle. Across the lot, Officer Dean Crow sat in his cruiser, restless fingers tapping the steering wheel. He'd been running on coffee and frustration for 8 hours, waiting for something, anything, that could make him look like a cop who mattered. When dispatch called about a suspicious male lingering near vehicles, he saw it as a gift. The suspect was black, mid-40s, limping heavily. Crow's jaw tightened. "Roger that, I'll check it out," he said, switching on his body cam. Marcus walked slowly toward the entrance, nodding at an older woman pushing a cart. He carried himself with the quiet patience of someone used to being watched. Inside the glass doors, a teenage clerk looked up from his phone, then quickly looked away. The cruiser rolled closer, tires whispering through water. Crow stepped out, hand on his belt. "Morning, sir," he called. Marcus turned, polite, cautious. "Morning, officer." "Mind telling me what you're doing out here?" Marcus blinked. "Getting groceries, same as everyone else." Crow's eyes moved from the prosthetic leg to the army cap. "You live around here?" "Couple of blocks down, yes, sir." "Got ID on you?" "In the car." Marcus gestured toward the SUV. "If it's okay, I'll grab it." "Slowly," Crow warned. His voice carried that practiced authority that turned ordinary words into threats. Marcus nodded and opened the driver's door. He reached for his wallet on the seat, movements deliberate. His cane leaned against the door frame. The drizzle turned heavier, blurring everything into silver mist. Behind Crow, another patrol car pulled in. Officer Myers, younger, nervously adjusting his jacket, called out, "Everything good, Dean?" "Just checking him out." Crow's tone sharpened. "Sir, step away from the vehicle." Marcus sighed, confused. "You asked for my ID. Now I'm asking you to stay." He obeyed, raising both hands. The cane slipped and clattered to the ground. Instinct made him bend slightly to retrieve it. Crow's hand went to his gun. "He's reaching for something." "No, wait." The first shot cracked through the rain, echoing off the metal carts. 2 more followed, muffled thunder against the concrete. Marcus staggered backward, coffee-colored jacket darkening as he fell beside the SUV. Shoppers screamed. Someone ducked behind a car. The teenage clerk froze behind the glass doors, eyes wide, phone trembling in his hand. Crow stood there breathing hard, weapon still pointed. Suspect reached for an object. "Possible weapon," he barked into his radio. His voice wavered just enough to betray the adrenaline. Myers hovered, pale. "Dean, that was a cane." Crow didn't answer. He kicked the metal cane away from Marcus's hand, then crouched down. Marcus's chest rose once, twice. He tried to speak, but only a wet rasp came out. Crow muttered something that might have been, "Stay down," though it sounded more like a plea. Marcus's phone lay on the asphalt, screen cracked but glowing. The impact had triggered a hidden emergency protocol, one he'd hoped he'd never need. A faint red pulse blinked beside a line of text. "Code black. Delta fallen." A few feet away, Myers whispered, "Jesus, Dean, what have we done?" "Backup's on the way," Crow said, voice brittle. He looked around as if the gray morning itself might judge him. The siren started distant, drawing closer. Marcus's eyes unfocused on the sky. For a moment he seemed to see something beyond the clouds. Faces, maybe, or the desert sun that once burned his back. His lips moved silently, forming a word no one could hear. The phone vibrated once, twice, sending coordinates to 6 locations across the country. In Seattle, New York, Miami, Arizona, and deep in the Tennessee woods, dormant devices blinked awake. The message was simple and final. One of their own had fallen. Back at the lot, the rain turned heavier, washing thin streams of red into the drain. The sirens merged into a single wail. Crow holstered his weapon and stared at his trembling hands. "He reached for something," he whispered again. "He reached for something." But the only thing Marcus Hale had reached for was his cane, and a little dignity on a rainy morning he never thought would be his last. The week before the rain and the sirens, mornings on Auburn Avenue started with the sound of an old radio in Marcus's shop. He liked the AM station out of Decatur that played soul from the 60s. It made the cement floor feel warmer, made the air smell less like oil, and more like somebody's father coming home on a Friday with a paycheck and good news. He rolled up the bay door at 7 sharp and greeted the street the way some men greet a congregation. "Morning, Miss Estelle," he'd call to the widow next door. She would raise her mug of chicory and tell him about the tomatoes. He'd wave the teenagers over when their chains squeaked, hand them rags, and show them how to flip a bike and listen for the click that meant things were lined up just right. He was good with machines because he was patient with them. Same with people. The prosthetic never stopped reminding him it was there. Some days it was a whisper, some days a nail in winter wood, but he had learned to make it quiet with movement. The rhythm of tightening a bolt, the measure of a ratchet, the way his weight shifted when he leaned into an engine, those were the small prayers of his new life. Veterans came by with broken lawnmowers and bent frames. He took their money when they insisted and refused it when they didn't have it. On Thursdays, he stayed late for the kids who had after-school jobs, kept a jar of peanut butter crackers on the counter, and told them that a thing could last a long time if you treated it like it mattered. There had been a time not so long ago when his mornings started with checklists that smelled like sand and gun oil. Afghanistan had rearranged his bones, visible and invisible. The day the convoy hit the pressure plate, the world went very quiet and very loud at once. He remembered the color of dust more than the color of blood. He remembered grabbing a shouting figure in a flak jacket who had fallen half out of a Humvee, camera straps across her chest, press badge swinging. "You okay?" he'd asked into a storm of sound. "I think so," she'd gasped, and then the roof peeled back like a tin can. He pulled her behind a wall of tires, hid her there with a medic, and went back for a kid who couldn't feel his legs. Later, when the smoke thinned, the reporter took off her helmet and showed him a face he would not forget. "Renee," she said, breathless. "Renee Caldwell. I owe you a story." They met again years later in Atlanta, not in dust, but in the brittle light of a local news studio. She recognized him instantly, even though time had sharpened him in places and softened him in others. She was working a series on veterans rebuilding their lives, and she wanted to film the shop, the kids with greasy hands, the way his laugh made the corners of the room settle. "People need to see this," she'd said, pushing her glasses up with the back of her wrist. "Not the big speeches, the little mercies." He shrugged and smiled. "Engines don't make speeches," he said, "but they do sing when you treat them right." They stayed friends. She stopped by for quotes about city grants and scrappy entrepreneurs. He always had coffee that tasted like it came from a church basement and advice that sounded like it came from a good uncle. Not everyone saw what Renee saw. There was a patrol car that liked to slow at his curb around dusk. Sometimes it stopped. A young officer would step out, one hand near his belt, and ask friendly questions with unfriendly eyes. "You running late, sir? You got a permit for after hours? Heard about some parts going missing in the neighborhood." Marcus learned how to keep his hands quiet and his voice steady. "I lock up at 8. "Yes, I have a permit. I buy parts from the same distributor as everybody." They never wrote anything down. They always left with a look that said the conversation had only paused. It wasn't every officer. He'd had good ones. An older sergeant who brought his mower in each spring and refused the veteran discount, pressed cash into Marcus's palm like he was paying for something more than a blade sharpened. A woman in uniform who asked about the ramp he built out front for a neighbor and then sent a crew with actual cement to make it permanent. But there was a young one who kept coming back. Dean Crow, the buzz cut always a week old, the jaw that never unclenched. He'd ask the same questions, circling a place he wanted Marcus to stand so he could feel bigger. "You get much traffic here?" he'd say, nodding toward the teenagers. "You run a lot of cash?" Marcus would wipe his hands, show him the receipt book, and say, "Enough to keep the lights on." Crow would lean in like a man listening for a lie. One afternoon, Crow came in just as Marcus was helping a boy named Jamal straighten a bent derailleur. The kid was bright, fingers quick, eyes careful. "You hanging around here a lot, son?" Crow asked without looking at him. Jamal glanced at Marcus. "He works," Marcus said. "Sweeps, learns. You got questions for me, ask me." Crow's smile was a thin line. "Just doing my job." "So am I," Marcus said, and the air in the shop cooled 10 degrees. Crow left without buying anything, but as he reached the door, he turned. "A lot of folks talk about you," he said. "Hope it's all true." It sounded like a compliment. It didn't feel like one. Renee stopped by that evening with a tripod slung over her shoulder and 2 coffees that actually tasted good. "You okay?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. He touched the wrench to the light and watched it catch a glint. "They keep looking for something that isn't here," he said finally. "Sometimes I think they want to be right more than they want to be safe." She set the coffees down and leaned on the counter. "City's changing," she said. "A lot of people are being told they don't belong in places they built." He chuckled without humor. "I'm hard to move," he said, tapping the prosthetic. "I anchor easy." She wanted to do another segment, one about small businesses being hassled under the banner of zoning and code enforcement. He agreed, on the condition that she didn't paint him like a victim. "Make me look like I do the work," he said. "Let them decide why the work bothers some people." She promised. They filmed that Sunday. He told a story on camera about his first bike, a used Huffy with a chain that jumped, how a neighbor showed him patience and a trick with a butter knife, and how that small kindness taught him that fixing things was just another way of saying you somebody got home. The footage was warm, human. She smiled the way people smile when they see something worth defending. On Monday, a paper notice appeared on his door. Surprise inspection. He laughed when he read it because the timing was lazy. The inspector turned out to be decent, a man with a clipboard and the posture of someone who didn't sleep well. "Looks good," he said after 20 minutes, then lowered his voice. "You've got a few eyes on you, Mr. Hale. Keep everything tighter than tight." Marcus thanked him, tightened anyway. He wasn't naive. He knew how fast a story can get away from the truth once it lands in the wrong mouth. The kids began to notice the cruisers lingering. Jamal asked if he should stop coming in the evenings. "No," Marcus said, sharper than he meant to. He took a breath. "You come when you can. You tell your mama I'll walk you to the bus if it gets dark." Jamal nodded, relieved. "Yes, sir." Miss Estelle dropped off a pecan pie with a note that read, "Don't let fools make you forget you're loved." He laughed, and then he didn't. That Wednesday, Renee brought him a flyer for a neighborhood town hall about public safety. The panel was 3 officers, a developer with perfect hair, and a pastor who always hugged people too long. "You gonna go?" she asked. He shook his head. "I got carburetors to rebuild." She rolled her eyes. "You're going, soldier," she said. "If I have to drag you." He went. He stood in the back with his arms folded and listened to a lot of sentences where the word vibrant meant expensive and the word clean meant empty. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried. "You can't police a neighborhood into loving you," he said. "You show up when the light's good, too, not just when it's bad. You help the kids fix their chains. You remember names." A few people clapped. The developer smiled like a man at a funeral counting cars. Crow was there, near the side door, writing nothing in a little book. After the meeting, Crow stopped him in the parking lot under a light that buzzed like a hornet. "You talk real nice," he said. Marcus tipped his cap. "Just telling the truth." Crow stepped closer. "Truth is a funny thing," he said. "After a while, folks only hear what they already believe." Marcus studied his face. For a second, he saw a boy who wanted to matter and had chosen the shortest road. He kept his voice even. "Then I hope you start believing better things," he said, and walked away. The night before the rain, Marcus closed early. The radio played Sam Cooke, and the kids had gone home. He wiped the counter until it shone. He wrote a list on a yellow pad: bread, milk, ribbon for a gift, the stuffed unicorn his niece liked. He thought about calling Renee to ask if her piece would air next week and decided to let her sleep. He locked the bay door, shuffled to the SUV, and sat with the engine off for a minute. The shop behind him clicked and settled, a ship tied tight to the dock. On his way home, he passed the supermarket and thought about getting the unicorn now. He glanced at the clock and shook his head. Tomorrow would be fine. He drove on, the wipers keeping time. In his rearview mirror, a pair of headlights turned where he turned and then didn't, and he told himself what men like him always tell themselves when a shadow doesn't move: it's nothing. He patted the dashboard, as if the car were a living thing that could carry a promise. 10 minutes, he thought. Tomorrow, just 10 minutes. Then home. Then cake, and a girl with a unicorn under her arm, and the good strong laugh that made the world behave. The rain had quit sometime before dawn, leaving the air damp and heavy with the smell of wet asphalt and gasoline. Marcus woke to the soft ache that traveled from the base of his spine down into the prosthetic. He swung himself out of bed with the slow discipline of habit, made coffee that tasted like burnt earth, and fed the stray cat that had adopted his porch. It was his niece's birthday, and he'd promised her two things: a unicorn plush from the supermarket and his famous peach cobbler. The list sat folded in his shirt pocket like a small mission brief. By 9 o'clock, the city had settled into its ordinary rhythm. Marcus spent the morning checking invoices and sorting a box of donated tools from a local church. At noon, he locked the shop, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked toward the gray sky. It smelled like another storm might come. The kind that makes people hurry without knowing why. He smiled to himself. "Let's make this quick," he muttered. Across town, Officer Dean Crow sat in his patrol car outside a diner, biting into a cold sandwich and scrolling through his phone. The words from the previous week's town hall echoed in his head. "You can't police a neighborhood into loving you." He'd laughed about it at first, but something about the calm way Marcus Hale had said it crawled under his skin. His sergeant had told him the department was watching how he handled community contacts. Maybe today would give him a chance to prove himself. When dispatch crackled with a vague call, male, black, mid-40s, seen pacing near parked vehicles at Southwood Market, he didn't hesitate. Marcus parked the SUV near the side entrance of the supermarket, where the pavement sloped toward the loading dock. The air still shimmered from the earlier rain, puddles catching the faint blue of a neon sign. He turned off the engine, reached for his cane, and stepped out. His leg clicked against the concrete, the sound barely audible over the hum of distant traffic. He was thinking about the look on little Kenna's face when she opened the gift, how she'd probably squeal loud enough to scare the cat off the porch. Inside the store, he moved slowly down the toy aisle, scanning for the pink box with the smiling horse. A cashier named Joel, a teenager with braces and sleepy eyes, waved at him. "Morning, Mr. Hale." Marcus nodded. "Morning, champ. How's that transmission treating you?" The boy grinned. "Still shifts like butter." Marcus chuckled, paid for the toy and a few groceries, then stopped by the coffee station for one last cup. Outside, a black and white cruiser slid into the lot and idled near the entrance. Crow watched through the windshield, his eyes narrowing when he saw Marcus balancing a grocery bag in his cane. To Crow, the man didn't look harmless. He looked practiced, deliberate. "Suspicious," he murmured into his mic. "I'm making contact." He stepped out, hand brushing the holster as if it were part of a reflex. The security guard on duty, Hank Reynolds, noticed the tension before words were even exchanged. Hank had worked that post for years, long enough to know the difference between routine and trouble. He adjusted his belt and called out, "Morning, officer. Everything all right?" Crow didn't answer him. His gaze stayed on Marcus. "Sir," Crow called, "mind coming over here a second?" Marcus turned, confused. "Something wrong?" "Just need to ask a few questions," Crow said, tone flat but sharp at the edges. "I'm just heading home, officer. Bought some things for my niece." "Uh-huh. Can I see what's in the bag?" Marcus sighed, lifted it slightly. "Groceries and a toy. That's all. Why don't you step over to your vehicle?" Crow ordered. Hank frowned, walking a few steps closer. "Dean, he's a regular. Comes here all the time." Crow shot him a look that froze him mid-step. Stay out of it, Hank. Marcus set the bag on the hood of his SUV, trying to stay calm. Is this about a report or something? Because Hands where I can see them, Crow snapped. Marcus obeyed, palms open, the bag rustling in the wind. The cane leaned against the bumper. A drop of rain fell from the awning and landed on his wrist. Officer, I'm a veteran. You can run my name if you need to. Crow's jaw tightened. Don't move. He circled behind him, scanning for anything that might justify the adrenaline clawing through his chest. His body cam blinked red, recording every breath. Myers, his rookie partner, pulled into the lot seconds later. Dean, what's going on? Possible suspect matching a theft report, Crow said quickly, though no such report existed. Keep eyes open. Marcus could feel the air thickening. People had stopped loading groceries, sensing danger the way animals sense a coming storm. He turned his head slightly. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. Crow barked. Don't turn around. I'm just talking to you. Face forward. Crow's hand twitched toward the gun again. The cane, nudged by the wind, tipped over and hit the pavement with a sharp metallic clang. Marcus instinctively bent down to grab it. In that half second of motion, Crow's training and fear collided. His fingers squeezed. The first shot echoed off the concrete walls of the loading dock. A bird startled from the roof. The second and third came in quick succession. Marcus stumbled, one hand reaching for the SUV, the other pressed to his chest. The coffee cup dropped and split open beside him, steam mixing with the smell of burnt gunpowder. Shots fired! Suspect reaching for weapon. Crow shouted into the radio, voice cracking. Myers froze, eyes wide. Weapon! Dean, that's a cane! Hank ran forward, shouting, Jesus, no, he wasn't armed. Crow shoved him back with his forearm. Get back, security! Marcus collapsed beside the bumper, eyes open but glassy. The neon from the store's sign painted his face pale blue. He whispered something that might have been a prayer or maybe a name. The prosthetic leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Myers knelt, shaking. He's bleeding bad. We need an ambulance. Crow stood over them, breathing hard. Secure the scene. His voice was hollow now, like someone reading a line he didn't believe. He stepped back, looking around as if trying to find an audience that would understand. Inside the store, Joel held up his phone, recording through the glass. The feed caught the chaos. The flashing lights, the figure on the ground, the cane a few feet away. When the sirens grew closer, Crow turned off his body cam. He didn't even realize he was doing it. He just wanted silence. The paramedics arrived 4 minutes later, too late to do anything except cover the wound. Hank watched them work, fists trembling. You killed a good man, he said quietly. Crow didn't respond. He was staring at Marcus's phone, which had fallen face up, its cracked screen pulsing with a soft red light. Back at headquarters, the footage from the supermarket cameras would later show a 5-minute blackout beginning 30 seconds before the shots. The system logs, supposedly automatic, had been corrupted. The official report would describe a tragic but justified use of force. But that morning, before any of the paperwork, before the news vans and the protests and the noise, there was only the sound of rain beginning again. It fell over the parking lot, washing thin rivers of coffee and blood into the storm drain, carrying away what was left of an ordinary errand that should have taken 10 minutes and nothing more. The alert reached them in 5 different places, at 5 different moments that would never leave their memories. In Seattle, Caleb Ward was halfway through his 3rd cup of coffee, surrounded by humming servers and half-built drones in the garage he called his office. The screen on his desk blinked red, cutting through the glow of code. Code black, Delta fallen. The timestamp froze him. He hadn't seen that message in 4 years, not since the team disbanded and they promised each other no more war. He didn't think. He just stood, heart hammering in the quiet room. His laptop was already encrypting files and booking a flight before he even realized his fingers were typing. No, he muttered under his breath. Not him. Please, not him. In New York, Jericho Cole was bent over a man bleeding out in the back of an ambulance when his phone vibrated twice, a silent pattern that once meant incoming fire. He glanced down, read the words, and felt the years collapse into dust. Hail, he whispered, and the EMT beside him didn't hear. When the patient was handed off, Jericho walked straight out into the rain without saying a word. He found an alley, pressed his palms against the brick, and fought the urge to punch through it. Then he called dispatch, voice steady again. Put me on leave. Family emergency. He didn't wait for permission. In Miami, Raiden Moss had just clocked out from his night shift at the airport. The alert flashed on his burner phone, the one he swore he'd thrown away. He stared at the message under the sodium lights, the humidity thick as breath around him. The words burned into his retinas. He got into his car, turned the key, and the same muscle memory that once saved him in Kandahar took over. By the time the sun rose, his duffel bag was in the trunk, and his badge was on the passenger seat, face down. Across the desert in Arizona, Isaiah Trent was teaching a group of recruits how to clear a room without getting themselves killed. The vibration in his pocket broke his rhythm mid-sentence. He looked down, saw the red code, and felt the old ghosts crawl out of the dust. His students waited for him to say something, but he just nodded once. Class dismissed. No one asked why. By nightfall, the range was dark and his truck was pointed east. And in a small cabin tucked into the Tennessee woods, Gideon Knox sat at a wooden table, polishing the same combat knife he'd carried through 3 tours. The silence of retirement suited him until it shattered. The beeping came from an old encrypted pager hidden in a drawer. He stared at it for a long moment before flipping it open. The screen flickered, then displayed 2 words he never thought he'd see again. Marcus down. His hand clenched around the metal until his knuckles went white. He stood, reached for his jacket, and whispered the line they'd all sworn by. We don't leave one behind. By dusk the next day, they were all moving toward Atlanta, 5 directions converging on one name. Each man carried his own ghost, but Marcus had been the kind of soldier who turned ghosts into brothers. Gideon remembered the night outside Fallujah when Marcus pulled him from a burning vehicle, prosthetic leg be damned, laughing like a man who refused to die. Jericho remembered the field hospital where Marcus calmed a panicked kid by teaching him how to breathe through the pain. Caleb remembered how Marcus could read a radio signal the way others read poetry. He'd been the center of their orbit, the calm that kept them human. Now that calm was gone. Caleb was the first to land. He rented a car and drove to the outskirts of the city while following GPS coordinates tied to the alert's origin. The address led him to Marcus's workshop. The police tape fluttered in the breeze like yellow ghosts. He parked a block away, scanned for cameras, and approached from the alley. Inside, the smell of motor oil lingered, mixed with the faint tang of gunpowder the rain hadn't washed away. On the workbench sat an unfinished bike with a child's name etched into the frame. Kenna. Caleb swallowed hard and set his phone on the table. I'm here, he said quietly. The rest of you better hurry. Jericho arrived 3 hours later, Raiden not long after. They embraced without words, the way soldiers do when grief is too heavy for language. Isaiah showed up before dawn, his truck covered in dust, his eyes red from the road. And when Gideon finally stepped through the door at sunrise, the room fell still. He looked at each of them, then at the photo of Marcus pinned to the wall, Marcus smiling beside his niece, grease on his hands, peace in his eyes. Gideon's voice was a low growl. Tell me everything. Caleb projected the footage he'd managed to retrieve from a nearby ATM camera. The resolution was grainy, but clear enough. They watched Marcus stand beside his car, watched the officer raise his gun, watched the moment the world ended. Jericho cursed under his breath, pacing the floor. Raiden's fists clenched and unclenched. Isaiah turned away, muttering a prayer. Gideon didn't move. He just stared until the screen went dark. Crow, he said finally. Dean Crow, that's the name? Caleb nodded. Atlanta PD, 8 years in, a couple of complaints, all buried. Jericho rubbed his jaw. We go through the proper channels? Gideon's look stopped him cold. Marcus tried the proper channels his whole damn life. Look where it got him. Isaiah leaned against the wall, arms crossed. We're not talking revenge. No, Gideon said. We're talking justice, real justice, the kind they don't write down. Caleb opened his laptop, eyes reflecting the code spilling across the screen. I can get us everything. Body cam footage, dispatch logs, GPS from their cruisers. Might take a day to crack their network. Do it, Gideon said. Jericho, talk to the coroner's office. I want confirmation, ballistics, autopsy, everything. Raiden, find the security guard who saw it go down. He's the only civilian witness we've got. Raiden nodded. Name's Hank Reynolds. Lives on Southwood Drive. I'll handle it. The plan formed like muscle memory, smooth and inevitable. No shouting, no bravado, just the quiet efficiency of men who had done this dance too many times before. Outside, the morning light turned the rainwater on the pavement into mirrors. Gideon looked out the window, his reflection caught between streaks of glass. He spent his life fixing things, he murmured. Engines, kids, broken people. Now it's on us to fix this. Jericho placed a hand on his shoulder. What's the move, boss? Gideon turned back to them, eyes hard. First we gather proof, then we make them see what they did. No bullets unless they fire first. Marcus wouldn't want blood, but he damn sure wouldn't want silence. They all nodded. Caleb hit enter on his keyboard, and the lights dimmed as the system hummed to life. Files began downloading, dispatch chatter, officer reports, deleted body cam backups. He glanced at Gideon. If they find out we're doing this, it's open season on all of us. Gideon smiled, the kind of smile that had carried men through hell. Then let them hunt. They'll learn what real soldiers look like. By the time the sun climbed over the skyline, the workshop had transformed into a war room. Maps spread across the benches, laptops glowed with stolen data, and a faded photo of Marcus in uniform hung at the center of it all. Underneath it, Gideon scrawled 3 words in thick black marker, only truth. They stood there for a long moment, the 5 of them, listening to the faint echo of traffic outside. Somewhere, a church bell tolled 9 times. Gideon broke the silence. We find Crow. We find whoever covered for him. And then we make sure Marcus Hale isn't just another headline. He looked around at the faces of his brothers, men bound not by orders but by the kind of loyalty that doesn't die. We move at sunset, he said. When they filed out one by one, the shop lights flickered. The unfinished bike on the bench glimmered under a stray beam of sunlight. Outside, the city went about its day, unaware that something older and far more disciplined than vengeance had just awakened. The message that began in blood and rain had reached its destination. The Brotherhood was back in motion, and this time, they weren't coming to fight a war. They were coming to end one. The news broke before sunrise, a single paragraph tucked into the local feed. Man shot by police after suspicious behavior in supermarket parking lot. Officers unharmed. It was the kind of headline that vanished by noon most days, buried under weather reports and football scores. But this one had a name attached, Marcus Hale, and by breakfast the story had already split the city in half. Some folks shook their heads and muttered that he should have just complied. Others, who'd bought their first bike from his shop or sent their kids there to learn a little patience, knew better. They saw the photo on the screen. Marcus's easy smile beside the words armed suspect, and something inside them cracked. The department moved quickly. A press conference within 24 hours, the chief standing stiff behind the podium. Our officers responded to a credible report of a possible theft in progress, he read from a prepared statement. The suspect failed to obey commands and made a sudden motion interpreted as a threat. The investigation is ongoing. He didn't say Marcus's name, not once. A reporter asked whether the suspect was armed. We recovered a metal object at the scene, the chief said carefully. He didn't mention that the object was a cane. Renee watched from her newsroom, the words washing over her like static. She had known Marcus for years, filmed him teaching kids to fix engines, laughed with him over cheap coffee. She knew how deliberate he was, how he moved like a man, counting every breath. The idea that he'd suddenly turned dangerous made no sense. She closed her notebook, grabbed her keys, and drove straight to Southwood Market. The rain had scrubbed most of the blood away, but the outlines remained, a darker patch on the pavement, a faint metallic smell that even time couldn't hide. A security guard stood near the entrance, eyes tired, jaw tight. She recognized him from Marcus's stories. "You're Hank Reynolds, right?" He hesitated. "Depends who's asking." "Renee Caldwell, Channel 7 News. I just want to talk about what happened." He looked past her toward the street as if measuring whether this was worth losing his job over. "I already told the police everything." "Then tell me what they didn't want to hear." Something in her tone softened him. He gestured toward the small booth by the lot. "Crow cut the feeds 5 minutes before it happened," he said quietly. "Said the system was glitching. I checked later. Logs wiped clean. Never seen that before." Renee's stomach nodded. You're sure? Positive. And listen, Marcus wasn't doing a damn thing wrong. He just looked tired, like he'd had a long day. Then Crow shows up, all puffed up, barking orders. I tried to calm it down. He told me to stay out of it. Did you tell Internal Affairs? He gave a bitter laugh. Lady, Internal Affairs works down the hall from those guys. I'll tell you what happens when you cross that blue wall. You stop getting back up. He rubbed his neck and leaned closer. Crow's not new to this. There've been other incidents, but they get buried. You didn't hear that from me. I didn't, she promised. By the time she reached her car, her phone was buzzing. The station wanted her on a different story, a traffic pileup, but she ignored it. She drove to Marcus's shop instead. The yellow tape was still up, the door sealed. A few wilted flowers and candles had gathered by the curb. She stood there for a long minute, hearing the echo of his voice in her head. Make me look like I do the work. That night, the story went national. A neighbor's cell phone video surfaced showing the final seconds. The gunshots, the chaos, Marcus's body hitting the ground. The clip ended just before Crow kicked the cane aside. Crow himself didn't watch it. He sat in the dark of his apartment, TV muted, bourbon sweating in his hand. The screen lit his face in pale blue, his name scrolling across the bottom, officer under investigation following fatal shooting. He told himself he'd done everything by the book. He said it out loud until it almost sounded true. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. You shot the wrong man. He frowned, typed back, who is this? No reply. He deleted it, drained his glass, and tried to ignore the weight pressing against his ribs. Across town, Sergeant Mills knocked on his door. The two men had trained together, shared beers after shifts. Mills didn't waste time. Dean, you need to get ahead of this. There's talk. Talk? People saying this wasn't clean. That maybe you lost control. Crow snorted. You know how it goes, Mike. Media twists everything. Mills didn't smile. This isn't just media. I heard something about some military types asking questions. Guys with no badges, no names. Crow's grip tightened around the empty glass. What kind of guys? The kind who don't knock twice, Mills said. Listen, lay low. Don't go home the same way every night. Just until this blows over. When Mills left, Crow locked the door, checked the windows twice. He poured another drink, hands shaking. The television flickered back to life, now replaying the clip from a different angle. For the first time, he saw himself as the world saw him. A man standing over a body, gun still smoking. He looked older than he remembered. Meaner. The phone buzzed again. Another message, this time with a photo, his own reflection caught in the window of his cruiser from earlier that day. Underneath it, we see you. He dropped the glass, heart racing. He called Mills, but it went straight to voicemail. Then he called dispatch. This is Officer Crow, badge 2219. I need a unit for a possible threat. Threat from who? The dispatcher asked. He stared at the phone, listening to the silence between each breath. I don't know. The city hummed outside, indifferent. Somewhere, protesters were lighting candles for Marcus Hale, chanting his name in front of the courthouse. The air was thick with rain and grief and something else. Expectation, maybe. Renee was there, camera rolling, her voice steady over the noise. He was a veteran, a teacher, a man who gave more than he took. And now people are asking who's going to give him justice. Back in his apartment, Crow turned off his phone, but the quiet didn't help. He kept seeing Marcus's eyes, that brief moment before the first shot. No anger, no fear, just disbelief. He told himself he'd done what training required. Yet deep down, something colder whispered that he'd been waiting for an excuse. He walked to the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and when he looked up, a wet handprint stained the mirror, dark, deliberate, not his. For a heartbeat he froze, certain it couldn't be there. But when he reached out, the glass was clean. His reflection stared back, pale and hollow. The following morning, another message appeared, this one printed and slipped under his door. We don't forget our own. He stepped into the hallway, but it was empty. Just the hum of the elevator and the faint scent of motor oil. He stared at the words until they blurred, a drop of sweat tracing down his neck. He didn't know yet that a group of men had already reached Atlanta. He didn't know that in a small workshop turned war room, 5 soldiers were piecing together everything the department tried to bury. All he knew was the growing certainty that someone was out there, watching, waiting for him to look away. The rain returned the next night, slow and steady, drumming against the tin roof of Marcus's workshop. Inside, 5 men stood around a table scattered with laptops, maps, and photographs. The hum of servers mixed with the faint ticking of an old wall clock, each second pulling them deeper into the mission none of them had asked for, but all of them understood. Gideon Knox traced a finger along a printed map of Atlanta's South District. His voice was low, steady, the kind that once carried through sandstorms. They think they can bury him under reports and silence, he said. So we dig. Caleb Ward's eyes were locked on the screen, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. Got into the precinct database. They used a private server for the body cam uploads. Not regulation. Someone's already wiped Crow's file, but he leaned forward, grinning faintly. Nothing ever really disappears. You just have to know where the ghosts live. Jericho Cole leaned against a workbench, arms folded. The medic in him still hated how clean police shootings looked on paper. We're not talking about bringing down one guy, he said. We're talking about the whole damn system that lets guys like Crow sleep at night. Raiden Moss, built like a freight train and quiet as a shadow, loaded rounds into a magazine with slow precision. Then we make the system lose some sleep. Isaiah Trent, the only one who still wore his wedding ring, glanced toward Marcus's picture pinned to the wall. We promise no blood unless there's no choice, he reminded them. Justice, not vengeance. Gideon nodded once. Marcus lived by that line, so will we, but justice needs proof. Caleb's laptop pinged. A video window opened, grainy, flickering. The recovered feed from Crow's patrol car. The sound was distorted, but clear enough. Suspect reaching for something. Then 3 cracks, sharp and final. Marcus's voice faint under it. Wait, then static. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The rain filled the silence. Jericho exhaled through his teeth. He never had a chance. Caleb kept typing, cross-referencing GPS logs from Crow's cruiser. Yeah, see that? He turned off the dash cam 2 minutes before the shots. That's tampering. I can prove it. Gideon's eyes narrowed. Do it. Then send copies to a dozen cloud servers. If they find us, they won't stop the truth. Raiden set down the loaded magazine and walked to the window. Crow's been holed up at his apartment since the shooting. He's got 2 officers rotating patrol outside, paranoid as hell. Good, Gideon said. Fear makes people talk. Caleb pulled up another file, this one from the medical examiner's office. They called the wound pattern inconsistent with defensive posture. Translation, he wasn't attacking. He was standing still when the first shot hit. Jericho swore under his breath. I want to see that report myself. Isaiah pushed off the wall, his voice quiet but firm. We're not just going to expose Crow. We're going to show every lie that came after, every name that signed off on it. Gideon nodded. That's the plan. We build the chain, link by link, until it wraps around their necks. They worked through the night, each man sliding back into the rhythm of the unit they used to be. Caleb handled the digital front, digging through archives, tracing encrypted messages, cloning hard drives. Jericho hit the morgue, pulling favors from old Army medics now working county shifts. Raiden surveilled the cops involved, moving through alleyways and rooftops like a shadow in denim. Isaiah went to talk with Marcus's neighbors, gathering quiet testimonies from people too scared to speak on camera. And Gideon coordinated it all from the shop, his steady presence anchoring them the way Marcus's voice once had. By dawn, the room smelled of coffee and burnt solder. Caleb looked up from his laptop. Got something big, he said. Crow wasn't the only one on site who fired that day. Dispatch audio shows another officer's weapon discharge, but the report only lists Crow. Someone covered for somebody. Jericho frowned. You saying there's more blood on their hands? Or more dirt, Caleb replied. Either way, we dig it up. Gideon turned to Isaiah. You still got that contact in the state attorney's office? Isaiah nodded. She won't stick her neck out, but she might point us toward the right files. Quietly. Do it, Gideon said, and keep her safe. That evening they reconvened. A thunderstorm rolled through, rattling the windows. On the table lay a new collection of evidence. Deleted dashcam footage restored, text messages between Crow and a superior officer, and a still image of Crow in a bar 2 nights after the shooting. Laughing. Jericho stared at it like it was a bad dream. He kills a man and smiles 2 days later. I don't know how they do it. They forget who they are, Gideon said. We're here to remind them. Raiden spread out a new map. I tracked the other officers from that night. 5 total. They're all still in rotation. They think they're untouchable. Caleb tapped the map where red dots marked their addresses. Not for long. Jericho frowned. What's the play? Gideon's eyes lingered on Marcus's photo. We let them feel the weight of what they did. Every one of them. No guns, no blood, just truth, the kind they can't run from. That night, the plan took shape. Caleb drafted messages to news outlets, anonymous drops containing snippets of evidence, just enough to spark questions. Isaiah prepared statements from witnesses, ready to leak if things went sideways. Jericho packed a med kit and unmarked van, old habits. Raiden built a small transmitter array that could hijack police radios within a 2-mile radius, and Gideon wrote a single line across a piece of paper and taped it to the wall. He served. You lied. When the rain stopped, the air outside felt charged, the way it does before something big breaks loose. Gideon stood at the doorway, watching the lightning fade over the horizon. He never wanted a war, he said quietly. But sometimes the only way to end one is to remind them who started it. Caleb closed his laptop. Everything's ready. We hit them tomorrow. Jericho looked at the others. You sure we can do this without getting blood on our hands? Isaiah gave a half smile. If we do it right, the truth will do the bleeding for us. They all fell silent again, the kind of silence that hummed with purpose. Gideon walked to Marcus's photo and touched the corner lightly, a gesture halfway between a salute and a prayer. You fixed things, brother, he whispered. Now it's our turn. Outside, thunder rolled one last time, a low growl fading into the distance. Inside, the Delta team prepared for their first strike, not with bullets, but with the kind of precision that only men who'd seen too much could wield. And somewhere in the city, Officer Dean Crow woke from a restless sleep, certain he'd heard something move in the dark, unaware that ghosts with names and purpose were already closing in. It started just after midnight on a Wednesday that smelled like rain and asphalt. The city slept, unaware that 5 men were moving through its quiet streets like shadows. Caleb parked the van 2 blocks from the first address, the dashboard glowing faint blue. Inside, the others checked their gear. No guns, no masks, just tools for a different kind of operation. Jericho's voice broke the silence. You sure about this? Gideon didn't look up from the map. We don't hurt them, he said. We remind them. The first house belonged to Officer Myers, the rookie who'd stood beside Crow the day Marcus died. His lights were still on, a flicker of television against drawn curtains. Caleb killed the van's engine, and Raiden slipped out into the wet dark, moving like smoke. Inside the house, Myers sat on the couch with a beer, trying to drown the echo of gunfire he swore he didn't fire. When the power cut out, the room fell into absolute black. A second later, the TV blinked back to life, not with the news channel he'd been watching, but with a grainy video feed. Marcus Hale's workshop, empty but lit by the swing of a single bulb. On the wall, written in bold red paint, were the words, He served. You watched. Myers froze, the bottle trembling in his hand. Then a voice came through the static, low, measured, familiar. He called you brother once. Myers stumbled to his feet, heart pounding. Who's there? He shouted. No answer. Outside, a motion light flickered on, revealing a figure in the yard for just a second before it vanished. The sound of a car door closing broke the silence. When the power returned, the screen was black again. On his kitchen table sat a single photo, himself at the scene, eyes wide, gun half drawn. At the bottom, a line of text in block letters, Tell the truth before it tells itself. 2 neighborhoods over, Sergeant Mills was jolted awake by the smell of smoke. He ran downstairs expecting fire, but the scent came from his living room, cigarette ashes shaped into the initials MH on his coffee table. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message read, Every lie leaves a fingerprint. He wiped the table clean with shaking hands and stared at the dark windows. They can't know, he whispered, but he didn't sound convinced. By 2 a.m., 4 officers who'd been at the scene had found something waiting for them. Messages carved into mirrors, printed photos sliding out of mail slots, shadows caught on porch cameras that disappeared when rewound. None of it violent, all of it deliberate. Crow was the last. He woke to the sound of his own front door unlocking. Not breaking, Unlocking, as if whoever entered already belonged there. He reached for his gun, found it missing from the nightstand. "Who's there?" he barked into the dark. The hallway light flickered once, then a voice spoke from the living room. "You always said you wanted to be seen, Dean?" He crept forward, hands shaking. "Show yourself!" The television came on. His body cam footage filled the screen, him shouting, the gun rising, Marcus turning. The shots rang out again, louder this time. Crow flinched. How did you get this?" The recording froze on Marcus's face, eyes calm even in death. Then another clip replaced it, a grainy security video of Crow 2 nights earlier at a bar, laughing, a beer raised high. The voice came again, closer now. "You forgot what that smile cost." Crow spun toward the window. Outside on the rain streaked glass, someone had written 3 words in ash. "Justice has memory." He backed away, fumbling for his phone, but it buzzed before he could dial. A text appeared. "We're not ghosts. We're your mirror." Then silence. When he finally dared to step outside, the street was empty. His neighbor's porch lights flickered as if the whole block held its breath. He thought about calling it in, but what would he say? That his past had come home? That the man he'd killed had friends who knew how to haunt the living? By dawn, the city was humming with whispers. Someone had leaked documents to the local news, dispatch logs, erased footage, memos showing the department had flagged Marcus as a repeat agitator weeks before his death. Reporters circled the precinct like vultures. Crow watched from his cruiser, sweat collecting beneath his collar. The chief ordered a lockdown, demanding to know who'd breached their system. No one answered. Renee Caldwell received an anonymous email at the same time. The sender's name was a single letter, G. Attached were encrypted files and a short message. "The truth's been buried. Help us dig." She clicked play on one of the videos and felt her throat tighten. The footage showed Crow switching off his dashcam seconds before the shooting. She didn't know who had sent it, but she recognized the precision. Whoever these people were, they wanted justice, not chaos. She called her producer. "Hold the 6 o'clock slot," she said. "We're going live." That evening, while the city argued on screens and sidewalks, Gideon and the team gathered back at the workshop. The air buzzed with exhaustion and quiet satisfaction. Caleb sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through the live feed of the news. "They're losing control of the narrative," he said. "Crow's name is everywhere." Jericho leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We didn't have to fire a single shot." Isaiah handed Gideon a cup of coffee gone cold. "What now?" Gideon looked toward Marcus's photo. "Now we see who they send to clean this up, and when they come, we give them the same thing we gave Crow." Raiden smirked. "The truth?" "The truth," Gideon said, "and a reason to be afraid of it." In another part of the city, Crow sat in his car outside the precinct, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. The radio crackled with chatter, officers spooked, stories about strange visitors, untraceable emails. He looked up at the building that once felt like safety. For the first time in his career, it looked like a trap. A sound drew his attention, a soft thud on the hood. He stepped out, heart racing. There, under the glow of the streetlight, lay an envelope sealed with a black fingerprint. Inside was a single flash drive. He slid it into his cruiser's laptop, the screen filled with footage of every officer who touched Marcus's case. Each one complicit, each one signed off. Then the final image, Marcus in uniform, saluting the flag. Underneath, text appeared slowly, word by word. "You swore to protect. You served yourself. Tonight, we serve you." Crow snapped the laptop shut, breathing hard. The street was empty, but he could feel eyes on him. He looked up toward the rooftops, the alleyways, the rain-slick windows, and for the first time he understood what it meant to be hunted without a single weapon raised against him. Back at the workshop, Gideon watched the city lights from the doorway. He could almost feel Marcus beside him, the quiet strength that had held their world together. "He wouldn't want fear," Gideon said softly. Caleb looked up. "No," he agreed. "But he'd want truth, and right now, truth is the loudest weapon we've got." The wind carried the sound of distant sirens through the open door. Gideon nodded, half to himself. "Then let it scream." The morning after the leak, Atlanta looked like it was holding its breath. News vans lined the courthouse steps, microphones pointed at every uniform that passed. The chief of police barked through rehearsed denials while flashes from cameras turned his words into stuttering light. "The department takes all allegations seriously," he said, and even he didn't sound like he believed it. Behind him, Crow stood stiff, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, the weight of sleepless nights carved into the lines of his face. The city was talking now, loudly, angrily, and once the noise started, there was no putting it back in the box. At the FBI field office downtown, a woman in a dark suit watched the broadcast without a word. Her name was Alana Frost. Once upon a time, she'd worn the same patch Marcus Hale had, Delta Force. They'd trained together, bled in the same sand, made promises about never letting the world chew them up. Now she worked inside the very system he no longer trusted. When her assistant stepped in and said, "Agent Frost, DC wants you to oversee the Hale investigation," she just nodded. "I'll handle it." The door closed behind her, and she whispered to the empty room, "Of course you'd still be fixing things, Marcus, even now." She met with the task force that afternoon. The briefing was chaos. Half the agents wanted to make an example of whoever leaked the files. The other half quietly wondered if the leaks were the only reason anyone cared about the truth. "We're not chasing ghosts," one agent snapped. "We're chasing felons." Alana flipped through the evidence, her voice calm. "Ghosts don't hack precinct databases, Agent Myers. People do, and sometimes they do it because no one else will." She closed the folder. "I want access to the crime scene, the workshop, and Crow's personal logs. Start there." By evening, she was driving alone through the South District. The radio talked about protests and candlelight vigils. She passed one outside a church, faces lit by flame, children holding photos of Marcus with hand-drawn halos. She parked down the block from the workshop. The lights were off, but she could feel eyes on her. She knocked twice on the steel door. No answer. "Gideon Knox," she said softly. "It's Frost. Open up." A shadow moved behind the curtain. Then the door creaked open just enough for her to slip inside. The air smelled of oil and rain. 4 men stood in a half circle, each one with the look of someone who'd spent a lifetime walking the line between hero and fugitive. Gideon stepped forward, older than she remembered, but still carrying that same gravity. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "You're wearing the wrong badge for this room." "And you're breaking a dozen federal laws," she replied. "Guess we both lost the map." Jericho broke the tension with a low chuckle. "She's still got the mouth," he said. Alana gave him a small smile. "And you still can't read a room." She turned back to Gideon. "I know what you're doing, and I know why. But if you keep going this way, they'll come for you. Hard." "They already did," Gideon said. "They just used a uniform this time." She looked toward Marcus's photo on the wall. "You think I don't want justice for him? He taught me what justice meant." "Then prove it," Gideon said. "From the inside." For a moment, no one spoke. Rain hit the windows again, a steady rhythm like a heartbeat. Alana sighed. "There's a press conference tomorrow. The department's going to announce Crow's suspension, but not his arrest. They'll pin on procedural error, maybe a missing report. If you want the world to see what really happened, you need to make sure it surfaces before they control the narrative." Caleb looked up from his laptop. "I can time it. Drop the rest of the footage 30 minutes before the conference. Anonymous source, mirrored across 3 servers." Alana nodded. "Do it, but scrub your signatures clean. If they trace it, I can only buy you so much time." Jericho crossed his arms. "Why help us at all?" She met his eyes. "Because Marcus once pulled me out of a blown convoy when everyone else ran. He said, 'One day, you'll be the only honest person in the room.' I've been trying to live up to that ever since." Isaiah spoke quietly. "Honesty's a dangerous thing these days." "So's silence," she answered. That night, Crow sat alone in his car again, parked near the precinct. He hadn't gone home since the messages started. His nerves were frayed. Every creak of the building sounded like a footstep behind him. When his phone rang, he nearly dropped it. "Crow," he said, voice hoarse. It was Deputy Chief Dalton on the other end. "You need to calm down, Dean. The department's handling this." "Handling it?" Crow barked. "They're hacking us. They know everything." "Lower your voice," Dalton snapped. "We'll take care of it internally. No more talking to the press. No statements. Understand?" Crow gripped the steering wheel. "You told me it was fine to shoot if I felt threatened. You said we'd bury it if it got messy." There was a pause on the line, then Dalton's voice turned cold. "You're talking too much." The call ended. Crow stared at the phone, realizing just how disposable he'd become. Outside, a car passed, its headlights sweeping over the windshield, and for a moment he thought he saw Marcus's reflection in the glass, calm and steady. He blinked, and it was gone. The next morning, the FBI sealed the precinct. Agents swarmed through the corridors, confiscating hard drives and boxes of paperwork. Officers whispered as Alana walked by. Some recognized her from old stories, soldier turned Fed, the one who still said ma'am to janitors and sir to no one. She ignored the stares and found Crow sitting alone in an interrogation room, his hands twitching. "I didn't mean to kill him," he blurted when she entered. "He reached for something. I thought." "You thought wrong," she said softly, "and now you're running out of people to blame." His eyes darted up. "You don't know what it's like. You make one mistake and they feed you to the crowd." She leaned forward. "No, Dean, they don't feed you to the crowd. They let the crowd starve while you eat in peace. Marcus was fed to the crowd. You just pulled the trigger." For a long time, there was only the hum of the ceiling fan. Finally, she pushed a folder across the table. Inside were photos, Crow's text messages with Dalton, timestamps proving he'd falsified his report, and an email draft from Dalton titled "Contain the Fallout." Crow stared at them like they were written in another language. "Where did you get this?" Alana stood. "From the same people you should have thought twice before crossing." When she left the room, she called Gideon. "It's done. He's cracking. But Dalton's planning to shift the blame by the end of the day. If you've got anything left, now's the time." Gideon's voice was calm. "We've got plenty." By nightfall, the final leak hit the airwaves. Dalton's recorded phone call with a city councilman, arranging to destroy evidence. It spread like wildfire. The department went into lockdown again, but it was too late. Crow confessed on camera within hours, his voice shaking as he named every superior who had covered for him. Alana stood outside the interrogation room, watching through the glass. She didn't smile. She just whispered, "You did it, Marcus. You made them listen." Across town, the Delta team sat in the dim glow of the workshop, the city's sirens echoing in the distance like a requiem. Caleb turned off the news feed and leaned back. "You think this changes anything?" he asked. Gideon looked at Marcus's photo. "It changes what we do next," he said. "We're not done. Not yet." The rain started again, soft at first, then harder, washing the city clean, or trying to. Alana stood outside, coat soaked, looking up at the gray sky. For a moment she could almost feel Marcus beside her, the warmth of his voice cutting through the cold. "Told you," it said in her memory. "Justice doesn't die easy." She smiled faintly, a tear mixing with the rain. "No," she whispered, "it doesn't." The night the storm broke, Atlanta seemed to hum with a nervous pulse. You could feel it in the air, like electricity before a lightning strike. Crow's confession had detonated across every news station, and the department was burning from the inside out. But truth doesn't settle quietly. The same men who had protected him, the ones who'd signed the reports and turned off the cameras, were now scrambling to protect themselves. Deputy Chief Dalton gathered them in a closed meeting and spoke in that sharp, measured tone of a man who believed control was a birthright. "We end this tonight," he said. "No more leaks, no more ghosts. They want a war. They'll get one." By sunset, Gideon's team knew something was coming. Caleb picked up encrypted chatter between off-duty cops calling themselves Blue Vow, a group of extremists who'd promised to restore order by any means necessary. Their target wasn't the department. It was Renee Caldwell. She'd gone live earlier that day with another expose, this time naming Dalton and the officers complicit in the cover-up. The video had gone viral, and with it, so did the hatred. "They're going after her," Caleb said, spinning the laptop toward Gideon. The coordinates traced back to a small neighborhood on the east side, where Renee lived in a modest one-story house with too many books and not enough locks. Gideon stood slowly, the decision already made. "We move now," he said. "Raiden, get the van. Caleb, keep the feeds open. Jericho, pack medical. Isaiah, you drive." No one questioned him. They'd moved like this before, only this time it wasn't an enemy across the ocean. It was the kind of threat that wore the same flag they'd once saluted. Renee was home, sorting through emails when she heard tires on gravel. She glanced out the window and saw headlights creeping up the street with their beams off. Her gut went cold. She reached for her phone, fingers shaking, and called Alana Frost. "They're here," she whispered. "I think it's them." Alana was already in her car, the FBI radio blaring static. "Lock the doors, Renee. Stay away from the windows." She hit the gas, siren wailing. Outside, 3 men in plain clothes approached the porch. One tapped on the door with his gun. "Channel 7? He called. "We just want to talk." Renee backed away slowly, heart hammering. "You picked the wrong house," she muttered. Then the first shot shattered the front window. The sound cut through the night like thunder. Jericho heard it half a mile away, headset crackling. "We're close!" Isaiah shouted from the driver's seat as they turned the corner, the van fishtailing on wet asphalt. Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Lights off," he said. "They don't see us till it's too late." Raiden jumped out first, silent as a shadow. 2 of the attackers were circling to the back door when they disappeared from view. A muffled scuffle, then the dull crack of bone meeting pavement. Jericho was right behind him, pulling Renee from the floor just as another bullet tore through the wall. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, dazed. "They said they'd make me disappear." "Not tonight," Jericho said, pushing her toward the hallway. "Stay low." From the front yard came a shout, one of the cops realizing they weren't alone. "We've got company!" Flashlights flared, slicing through the rain. Gideon stepped out of the shadows with the quiet certainty of a man who led soldiers through worse. "Put it down," he called. "Nobody has to die tonight." The reply was a gunshot that splintered a tree trunk beside him. Raiden fired a warning burst into the air, sending birds scattering into the storm. The remaining men hesitated, torn between fear and pride. "You don't even know who you're messing with," one shouted. Gideon walked forward, unflinching. "That's the problem," he said. "You never know who you're killing either." The fight didn't last long. The Delta team moved with the precision of ghosts, disarming, disabling, never killing. By the time Alana's car screeched to a stop out front, it was over. The attackers lay cuffed in the mud, bruised but breathing. Rain fell harder now, washing away the smoke and the shouting. Renee stumbled out onto the porch, drenched but alive. Alana ran to her, pulling her close. "You okay?" she asked. Renee nodded, eyes wide. "I saw him," she said softly. "I saw Marcus. For a second, I swear," her voice broke. "He was standing right there." Alana looked past her toward Gideon, who stood at the edge of the yard, staring at the horizon. She knew what Renee meant. Some people don't stay gone. Not really. By dawn, the Blue Vow arrests were all over the news. The footage from Renee's cameras, yes, she'd kept them running even as bullets flew, showed the plainclothes cops attacking her home, then being taken down by unidentified operatives. The internet dubbed them the 5 Shadows. Nobody knew who they were, but the message was clear. Justice had muscle now. Crow watched the broadcast from a holding cell, his hands clasped, eyes hollow. "They came for me," he said quietly to the guard. "They'll come for all of you." The guard smirked. "You sound scared." Crow looked up, his voice steady. "I'm not scared. I'm praying you'll listen before it's your turn." Dalton didn't listen. He called in favors, tried to pull strings that no longer existed. His name hit every major outlet by noon, accompanied by audio proof of his corruption. Protesters gathered outside his home, chanting Marcus's name until sunset. When the FBI came for him, Alana was there, warrant in hand. "Deputy Chief Dalton," she said evenly, "you're under arrest for conspiracy and obstruction of justice." He sneered. "You think you've won, Agent Frost? You let vigilantes dictate law now?" She met his gaze without flinching. "No, I let the truth dictate it." As they led him away, flashbulbs popped, capturing the face of a man who had believed himself untouchable. Across the street, Gideon watched from the crowd, hands buried in his jacket pockets. Caleb stood beside him, whispering, "We did it." Gideon didn't smile. "We reminded them," he said. "That's all." That night, the team gathered one last time in Marcus's shop. The rain had stopped, and the air smelled of metal and wet earth. Renee joined them, hair still damp, a quiet gratitude in her eyes. "The city's changing," she said. "People are listening." Gideon poured a small glass of whiskey and set it on the workbench beside Marcus's photo. "He'd have said we overdid it," he murmured. Jericho laughed softly. "He'd have said we were late." Caleb turned on the old radio in the corner. A blues song filled the room, low and rough, like memory. They stood there in silence, 5 soldiers and a reporter, letting the music speak what words couldn't. Outside, the first light of morning crept across the sky, soft and gray. For the first time in a long time, the city felt almost still. Justice had come, messy, imperfect, but real. And somewhere beyond the clouds, Marcus Hale's name carried on the wind, not as a headline, but as a promise kept. 6 months later, the city wore the kind of calm that only comes after a long storm. The courthouse square was quiet, except for the rustle of flags and the slow murmur of a crowd gathered beneath a gray winter sky. The bronze plaque that now stood near the steps read, "In memory of Sergeant Marcus Hale, veteran, teacher, brother." Beneath it, a single line carved deep. He believed in fixing things, even when the world was broken. Renee stood near the front with her camera lowered, her press badge tucked away for once. The ceremony wasn't for headlines. It was for the people who still needed to believe that truth could outlive fear. A military band played softly as an honor guard carried a folded flag toward the small podium. Alana Frost, dressed in a dark coat, stepped forward. Her voice carried without effort, firm but human. Marcus Hale served this country abroad and at home. He taught us that silence in the face of wrong is its own kind of betrayal. Today, we remember not just how he died, but how he lived. The flag was handed to a little girl in a white coat, Kenna, Marcus's niece. Her small hands barely held it. When she looked up at Alana, the agent knelt beside her and whispered something no one else could hear. Kenna nodded, clutching the flag to her chest. A few rows back, Gideon and the others stood together, heads bowed, the same quiet strength binding them now that had carried them through battlefields half a world away. When the ceremony ended, people drifted toward them. Old friends, veterans, neighbors who had once bought their first bike from Marcus's shop. They shook hands, some whispered thank yous, others just touched Gideon's arm as if to say, "We know." Renee approached, her eyes wet but steady. "You did right by him," she said. Gideon shook his head. "No," he said. "He did right by us. We just finished the job." They walked together toward the edge of the crowd. Renee stopped beside the bench where Marcus used to sit with his coffee every morning. She pulled a small tape recorder from her pocket. "I never got to tell you," she said, "that I found the old interview I did with him, the one about fixing engines and teaching kids." She pressed play. Marcus's voice came through, warm and unhurried. "People think justice is about punishment, but it's really about repair. You can't punish a broken thing back into shape. You fix it by remembering it's worth something." The sound hit Gideon like a weight and a gift all at once. He took off his cap, rubbed the back of his neck, and said quietly, "Guess he's still teaching." Renee smiled through her tears. "Guess so." Across the square, a group of officers stood at attention, while Crow was led out of the courthouse in cuffs. His face was pale, eyes hollow, no fight left in him. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but the only voice that seemed to reach him was from a woman in the crowd who said, "He reached for his cane." Crow stopped, jaw trembling, then looked away as they guided him down the steps. The crowd parted without a word. No one cheered. It wasn't a moment for triumph. It was a reckoning. Later that afternoon, as the sun broke through the clouds, the Delta team gathered back at Marcus's workshop. The yellow tape was long gone. The place smelled like oil and old wood again. The unfinished bike still sat on the workbench, chain polished, tires new. Jericho ran a finger along the frame. "You ever think about finishing it?" he asked. Gideon nodded toward Kenna, who was sitting near the door drawing in a notebook. "Already did," he said. "She wanted to learn." The girl looked up and grinned, holding up her sketch, a picture of her uncle standing beside a shiny bike under a blue sky. Raiden chuckled softly. "Kid's got his hands," he said. Isaiah added, "and his heart." Caleb turned on the old radio again, letting the soft crackle fill the space. A slow blues song rolled out, rough around the edges, something Marcus used to hum when the world felt too heavy. They didn't speak for a while. The rain had stopped, but droplets still slid down the window pane, catching bits of light. Alana arrived a few minutes later, her coat damp from the drive. She handed Gideon a small envelope. "From D.C.," she said. "Official commendation. They're calling it the Hale Initiative, federal oversight for police shootings involving veterans." Gideon turned the envelope in his hands, unread. He'd have liked that, he said quietly. Not the name, the purpose. Alana smiled faintly. He didn't care much for names anyway. When she left, the sky outside was turning gold at the edges. Gideon stepped onto the porch, looking toward the city skyline where the sun broke through the clouds. The others joined him, one by one. Renee lifted her camera, not to film, but to remember. "What now?" Jericho asked. Gideon looked out over the street, his voice low but sure. "We stay ready. Somewhere out there, another man's reaching for his cane. And when he does, someone needs to make sure he's seen." They stood there until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the shop in soft amber light. The world hadn't changed overnight. It never does. But something had shifted. People talked differently now. They looked longer before judging. Maybe that was enough for a start. As dusk settled, Gideon closed the shop door and flicked off the light. In the darkness, the faint glow of Marcus's old phone blinked once from the shelf where it had been left, a red pulse, steady and calm, like a heartbeat. Then it went dark again. That night, across the country, 5 identical signals lit up briefly on 5 old devices buried in drawers and boxes. Not alarms this time, just a single message, short and clear. "Stand down. Mission complete." Gideon sat alone for a while, listening to the wind move through the trees. "You did it, brother," he whispered. "You fixed it." He raised the glass of whiskey on the table to the empty chair across from him. "Rest easy." Outside, the first stars began to break through the clouds. Somewhere, in a way that only the heart can understand, the city breathed easier. Justice had come, quiet but certain, carried not by anger, but by memory. And long after the last light in the workshop went out, the echo of Marcus Hale's words seemed to linger in the night air. You can't punish a broken thing back into shape. You fix it by remembering it's worth something.